Every scientist knows that science, no matter how far it advances, will always have boundaries. It's one of the most powerful tools humanity has ever created, but it remains exactly that, a tool. The moment someone begins treating science as the only possible path to truth, well, they've stopped approaching it like a scientist and started treating it like a belief system. And the ancient discoveries we're about to see are a striking reminder of why. Despite years of investigation and theories, these discoveries continue to defy convincing explanations. Can you explain them? Well, stay tuned to find out. Number 15, the pharaoh Sesostris. When it comes to ancient Egyptian history, it can be super hard to separate fact from a story that grew bigger every time somebody retold it. Sesostris is perhaps the perfect example. Herodotus wrote in the 5th century BC about an Egyptian king who marched through Asia, crossed into Europe, and defeated the Scythians and Thracians. Diodorus Siculus went considerably further, claiming Sesostris conquered practically the entire known world. But Egyptian records contain no such world-conquering pharaoh. Historians instead suspect that Greek writers blended the achievements of several rulers, particularly Senusret I, who reigned around 1971–1926 BC, and Senusret III around 1878–1839 BC. Both were powerful 12th dynasty kings with documented campaigns in Nubia. Senusret III even built a chain of imposing frontier fortresses there. But Europe? Nothing. Herodotus himself admitted Egyptian priests supplied much of his information. Well, somewhere between those priests and later Greek historians, two genuine pharaohs may have slowly turned into one impossible conqueror. Number 14. The Menehune. We know a lot about who settled Hawaii, yet old stories from Kauai insist that somebody else was already there, or at least something was. They were called the Menehune. Little people often described as roughly 2 or 3 feet tall, incredibly strong, and happiest working after sunset. Hawaiian tradition credits them with roads, temples, stonework, and especially Alikoko fish pond near Lue on Kauai. One famous tale says the pond was completed overnight by thousands of Menehune passing stones hand to hand from distant Makaweli. No archaeological discovery, however, has established a separate race of miniature pre-Polynesian inhabitants. There is another curious wrinkle. The word Menehune may be related to the Tahitian Manahune, meaning commoner or person of lower social rank, raising the possibility that later storytelling transformed ordinary people into supernatural builders. Even early Hawaiian accounts complicate the picture. So were the Menehune forgotten inhabitants, a misunderstood social class, or folklore given flesh? Kauai kept the story. Archaeology has not settled it. Number 13. Pumapunku leaves us with an awkward question. How did builders more than 1,000 years ago handle stone with such control and precision? Near Tiwanaku in Bolivia, enormous blocks of sandstone and andesite were shaped into sharp corners, flat surfaces, grooves, and repeating geometric forms. Several pieces weigh many tons, yet their workmanship can look surprisingly neat even today. The site belonged to the Tiwanaku civilization and flourished around the first millennium AD, although its original role remains debated. What makes the ruins so curious is the famous H-shaped blocks. Their matching cuts once encouraged claims that unknown machines must have shaped them. But archaeologists have shown that stone tools, abrasives, and patient workmanship could achieve remarkable results. Still, knowing a possible method does not make the achievement ordinary. These builders had no modern cranes or electric equipment. Somehow, they quarried, transported, shaped, and assembled massive pieces with extraordinary planning, and much of their story disappeared with them. Number 12. The ancient Osirion. When British Egyptologist Margaret Murray was excavating the Temple of Seti I at Abydos back in 1902, she came across something that seemed completely out of place. Beneath the temple, she found a massive stone complex now known as the Osirion. What's crazier is that it was built with super-enormous granite blocks transported all the way from Aswan. Its architecture carries an older, heavier character than much of the New Kingdom temple above, and that difference has fueled arguments ever since. Even its setting feels unusual. Water surrounds a raised central platform while the lower portions remain flooded, giving the monument an almost otherworldly appearance. Most Egyptologists associate it with Seti I and the worship of Osiris. Yet its deliberately ancient-looking construction has encouraged claims that its story began much earlier. Others connect its watery layout with Egyptian beliefs surrounding death, rebirth, and the underworld. More than a century after Murray encountered it, the Osirion still leaves us with a strange question. Why was something this insanely amazing built beneath Abydos? Number 11. The Talpiot Tomb Well. If there's one thing that can start an argument among archaeologists and Christians at the same time, it's a tomb with the name Jesus, son of Joseph, written inside. That is basically what happened in East Talpiot in 1980. Construction workers uncovered a first-century burial chamber containing 10 limestone ossuaries, which archaeologists Joseph Gath and Amos Kloner later examined. 6 carried inscriptions, and among the names were Yeshua bar Yehoseph, Maria, Yose, and Mattia. Things became even more controversial in 2007 when The Lost Tomb of Jesus, produced by James Cameron and directed by Simcha Jacobovici, argued that these names could belong to Jesus and his family. Most specialists remain unconvinced. Jesus, Joseph, and Mary were common names in first-century Judea, making the combination less extraordinary than it sounds. And there's another obvious problem. If those really are Jesus's remains, the traditional account of his resurrection suddenly becomes a much bigger mystery. Number 10. Carrowmore in County Sligo is not one lonely tomb sitting in an empty field. It is an entire cemetery built over generations, with stone circles and passage graves scattered beneath the shadow of Knocknarea. Many date to the 4th millennium BC, placing Carrowmore among Ireland's oldest major megalithic cemeteries. At its heart stands Listagill, a large monument surrounded by smaller tombs, almost as though the whole landscape had been planned around it. Excavations uncovered cremated human remains, stone tools, pins, and other traces left during funeral ceremonies. Yet one discovery raises a darker question. Archaeologists found considerable charcoal beneath parts of the central monument, evidence that fire played a role before or during its construction. Whether those flames belong to rituals, clearing work, or something more meaningful is difficult to prove. People kept returning to Carrowmore for centuries, burying their dead among monuments already ancient to them. Whatever drew generation after generation back to this ground clearly mattered, and its meaning never made it into writing. Number 9. The Carnyx from Tintignac. This freakishly creepy thing might look like a weird animal frozen mid-scream. And perhaps that terrifying appearance was part of its purpose. Celtic warriors were known for carrying carnices, huge bronze trumpets topped with snarling animal heads whose cries could turn a battlefield into something far more frightening. But the one found at Tintignac in France refuses to fit neatly into that story. Ancient images usually portray these trumpets raised vertically, high above the warrior. Here comes the problem. The Tintignac example has a completely straight internal tube, making that position difficult. Playing it sideways would have been equally troublesome while marching or fighting. Its wolf-shaped head certainly carries the menace expected from a Celtic war trumpet, but its construction suggests another possibility. Perhaps this particular instrument was never meant for combat. Its disturbing voice may instead have belonged to ceremonies, rituals, or gatherings whose true meaning disappeared with the people who once heard it. Number 8. Karahunj across a windswept patch of southern Armenia. More than 200 upright stones form one of the country's strangest ancient sites. Karahunj, also called Zorat's Karar, includes stone rows, a central enclosure, burial chambers, and dozens of slabs pierced by carefully cut holes. Those openings have caused most of the argument. One theory says ancient observers aimed them toward the horizon to follow the sun, moon, or certain stars, turning Karahunj into an early observatory. It sounds fascinating, but archaeologists remain cautious. Studies of the surrounding graves and objects connect much of the complex with the Bronze and Iron Ages, while other researchers believe the stones mainly belong to a cemetery. Even the holes may have served a purpose far less dramatic than astronomy. But Karahunj refuses to settle comfortably into either explanation. During strong winds, air passing through certain openings can produce eerie sounds, helping inspire its popular nickname, the Speaking Stones. Number 7. The Garden Tomb, a rock-cut grave discovered in Jerusalem in 1867, became the center of another argument over where Jesus may have been buried. Nearby rises a weathered cliff whose shape was compared with a skull, an intriguing detail considering Golgotha means place of the skull. Then came British General Charles Gordon. After seeing the area in 1883, he became convinced that this was the biblical Golgotha, and the burial chamber nearby gradually became famous as the Garden Tomb. Several details seemed almost too convenient. A tomb, a garden-like setting, and a possible skull hill all within walking distance. Archaeology, however, spoiled the neat picture. Studies of its layout and burial features generally place the original chamber in the Iron Age, roughly the 8th or 7th century BC, making it centuries older than Jesus. Later modifications show that people continued using the site, but the Gospel of Matthew describes Joseph of Arimathea's tomb as new. That detail leaves this beautiful candidate with a very old problem. Number 6. Karnak stones. Someone spent an astonishing amount of effort arranging thousands of stones across the countryside of Brittany, France, and roughly 6,000 years later, we still cannot agree on why. The Karnak alignment stretched through several groups, with long rows of standing stones running across fields for more than a kilometer in places. Many were raised during the Neolithic period, long before written records could tell us what their builders had in mind. The sheer scale makes the missing explanation frustrating. Were these lines connected with ceremonies, burial traditions, territory, gatherings, or movements of the sun? Each possibility has supporters, but none explains everything neatly. People living nearby eventually supplied answers of their own. One famous legend claims the stones were Roman soldiers turned to rock, while another version credits Saint Cornelius with petrifying an advancing army. Archaeology gives us something less magical but not necessarily more complete. We can date the alignments, study their construction, and map every row. The reason thousands of people once considered this enormous undertaking worthwhile remains frustratingly out of reach. All right, now let's move to number 5. The Herculaneum Scrolls when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 C. Hundreds of scrolls inside a villa at Herculaneum were burned into black, brittle lumps. Oddly enough, that destruction may also have saved them. The heat carbonized the papyrus instead of wiping it away, leaving entire texts trapped inside layers that no one could safely separate. Early attempts to open them often ended badly, with priceless pages breaking apart before they could be read. Modern researchers have found a gentler way in. Powerful X-rays can scan the rolled papyrus without touching it, while computer techniques help distinguish traces of ink inside. Work led by researchers including Brent Seals has already shown how much may still be recoverable. And that possibility is enormous. The collection could contain philosophy, literature, correspondence, or works that vanished everywhere else centuries ago. It's impossible to pinpoint exactly how much survives inside the unopened rolls. Number 4. Paluxy River footprints. The Paluxy River in Texas became famous for real dinosaur footprints, but another set of marks caused a much bigger argument. Among the Cretaceous tracks near Glen Rose were long impressions that looked suspiciously like human feet. If they really were human, everything we know about our timeline would have a serious problem. Dinosaurs walked here more than 100 million years ago, while humans arrived vastly later. Yet photographs, casts, and supposed footprints kept the story alive for decades. During the Depression, locals even sold tracks to tourists, which only made separating genuine finds from altered ones harder. Scientists eventually examined the controversial prints closely and found far less mysterious explanations. Several were dinosaur tracks damaged by erosion until their toe impressions disappeared, leaving a human-like shape. Others had apparently been carved. Most researchers therefore reject the human footprint claim today. Still, those strange marks fooled plenty of people. Number 3. Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe caused trouble for an old idea about civilization. More than 11,000 years ago, communities in what is now southeastern Turkey gathered to raise huge T-shaped limestone pillars, many decorated with foxes, snakes, boars, birds, and other animals. That date matters because farming was only beginning to develop in the region. For decades, the familiar story suggested permanent settlements came first, and monumental gathering places followed later. Göbekli Tepe made that sequence much harder to defend. Excavations led by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt from 1995 revealed circular enclosures containing pillars weighing several tons, arranged with remarkable care. Their full meaning remains uncertain. Ritual gatherings, ceremonies, feasting, and social meetings have all been proposed, while calling the complex simply a temple may go further than the evidence allows. Stranger still, parts of these enclosures were deliberately filled during prehistoric times. Whoever gathered here eventually covered their extraordinary monuments, preserving a puzzle that would wait thousands of years to return. Number 2. Mongolia's deer stones. More than 1,000 deer stones have been recorded across Mongolia and neighboring regions, and their carvings are difficult to forget. Tall slabs rise beside ancient burial grounds, covered with belts, weapons, earrings, animals, and reindeer shown with long bodies and sweeping antlers. Many of those deer seem to be flying upward rather than running across the earth. The monuments appeared during the Late Bronze Age, roughly 3,000 years ago, among mobile communities of the Eurasian steppe. Human remains are not normally buried directly beneath the stones, which makes their purpose harder to pin down. Nearby ritual features sometimes contain sacrificed horse heads and hooves, suggesting ceremonies connected with death, status, or journeys into another world. Researchers have also wondered whether the soaring reindeer carried a spiritual meaning, perhaps guiding the dead toward the sky. We can recognize the weapons and animals carved into the rock, but not their relationship. Number 1. The White Parish Roman marble. For about a decade, one woman in the English village of White Parish used an old marble slab to help mount her horse. Nothing about it seemed great until she noticed a laurel wreath carved into its surface and decided to ask an expert. The answer changed everything. Her ordinary mounting block was actually a Roman marble relief, probably dating to the 2nd century CE and carrying an inscription honoring a man named Demetrios. Its value was estimated at around 15,000. But the more interesting question was how a Roman artifact, originating somewhere in Greece or Asia Minor, ended up beneath someone's feet in an English garden. One possibility leads back roughly 3 centuries, when wealthy British travelers returned from European grand tours carrying antiquities home with them. Unluckily, no record has yet connected this particular piece to an owner or journey. Somewhere along the way, its history simply broke apart. If you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Take care, and we'll see you later.